Welcome back to the Adam Schefter Podcast. It's Combine Week, once again, which always signifies the unofficial kickoff of the start of the NFL offseason, college prospects descending upon Indianapolis to work out and interview with pro teams as they get ready for the draft process that's unfolding right now, as that leads in to the start of the NFL new league year in early March. And so it's all about to begin. And to kick off the NFL offseason, we're going to be joined today by the co-host of the Pat McAfee Show, my friend, my colleague, Ty Schmit, who always leads us on the weekly six-pack.
Good to see you again, Shefty. You mentioned it. I love Combine Week. Absolutely love Combine Week. Now, every prospect is a potential Hall of Famer. I love Combine season. We'll get to that in a little bit, Shefty, but let's kick off this week's six-pack with topic number one. We talked about this last week. Matt Stafford is likely going to be kind of the first domino to fall in the quarterback market this offseason. That'll kind of dictate what happens with all the other available guys. Do we have any kind of updates on that situation?
You know, it's funny, Ty. We said this last week. We'll say it again. We're taping this Tuesday morning, February 25th. I want to be very clear because something could change at any moment here. But as we stand on Tuesday morning, February 25th, I think you have to remember that for any trade to occur, some team is going to have to make Matthew Stafford happy from a contractual standpoint. And that's not very difficult to do. That's pretty simple, I think. But then you also have to make Matthew Stafford happy while knowing that you're paying him as a top quarterback. And the Rams saying, well, if you're paying a top quarterback, then you should be paying us commensurately, right? With fair compensation. So you have to satisfy two parties in this particular case. And that is not so simple to do. And everybody across the league is waiting to see what happens with Matthew Stafford because there's one Matthew Stafford. And the Rams don't have to do anything until the start of the new league year when he's got a roster bonus due. And so everybody's just sitting back and waiting for Matthew Stafford. Yes, his agents have spoken to other teams to ascertain value. Yes, the Rams have heard what that value is. Yes, the Rams have to figure out what's best for them. If they want, they could trade him. But I also think there's an element of the Rams that absolutely wants Matthew Stafford back in LA, which makes it a difficult situation to predict where literally, if we go back over the last week, I'd be like, I think he's getting traded. No, I think he's going to be back in LA the next day. And literally you could change your mind day to day, hour to hour, because there are so many twists and turns to the whole situation. Ultimately, as you said, he is the first big move that has to be made. If the Rams wind up trading him, then I think Aaron Rodgers does come into play in Los Angeles, and Aaron Rodgers is still under contract to the Jets as we tape this, so it's a moot point. But obviously, Aaron Rodgers is not going to sign with anybody else until he gets clarity about what's going to happen with Matthew Stafford and the Rams, because if Stafford is back in Los Angeles, that means Rodgers can't go there, and it would be one less place and one fewer option for him to have while we wait for all these other teams that are out there to fill their quarterback needs. We've heard the teams that are looking to address quarterback: the Giants, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Browns, the Colts potentially even looking to add somebody. So there are a lot of teams out there that need quarterbacks, but before anything happens at that position, the Matthew Stafford situation needs to be resolved before we can get clarity, and that could come at any point.
Do you think, will this be a situation where he's kind of like the hot topic talk of the combine? Do you think we're going to get much more clarity about what potentially happens with him after the combine is over?
I think it could happen while we're at the combine. You just don't know. Look, here's the thing about the combine. Many of the Rams coaches and front office members don't even go.
True.
They don't even go to the combine anymore because the combine's gotten so big, to our point earlier, that they feel like they could watch the drills on tape. They get the interviews that their team does on tape. They watch it. They can always go to pro days. They can always arrange a visit with a player if they really want to talk to him. and they feel like it's counterproductive to be there. So they don't need to be there as we speak. So I don't know if the combine is any vehicle to get things going in regards to the Matthew Stafford trade talks.
All right, Shefty, with all that in mind with Stafford, let's move on to topic number 2. Where does all that leave the Steelers and their QB plans? Because it seems like Russell Wilson, everything we've heard from him, he seems to think that he is going to be back. He's going to be a Steeler. But then you hear all this other stuff that says, Justin Fields is the more likely option, or, Aaron Rodgers' name has been mentioned. Where does this all leave them in their QB plans?
Well, listen, I think if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to check in on Matthew Stafford. I don't know that that's going to be the spot that ultimately he winds up in. I think it's a tough deal for the Steelers to get done. I think when Matthew Stafford surveys it, Matthew Stafford's going to have to be on board with everything as well. And as much sense as it would make for Pittsburgh to try to get Matthew Stafford, in the end, my guess is he doesn't wind up as a Pittsburgh Steeler, and that the Steelers then have to go figure out what they want to do at quarterback. And you'd like to get this resolved. I don't believe they have a quarterback currently under contract. So the Pittsburgh Steelers can head into the offseason trying to upgrade wide receivers, trying to trade for guys if you don't even know who your quarterback is. So to me, I know there was this talk earlier in the offseason about how Russell Wilson wouldn't be back, and maybe he won't be. But I can tell you they're going to be talking about trying to work out something with him, and there's certainly the possibility that he's going to be back there in Pittsburgh, potentially as the starting quarterback. And I think that they're going to be talking to Justin Fields, and I do think eventually that they'll find a way to work out a deal with one of their 2 quarterbacks, either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. And I think that's something that they'd like to get in place, done before the new league year begins, Wednesday, March 12th. So clearly, the Pittsburgh Steelers would like to have something done before March 12th. And I would think that they'll use this week of the combine to ramp up conversations with those quarterbacks to see if they could get a deal done with either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields before they can go on and explore other options at that position.
Okay, so something to keep an eye on. I just assumed too that they might be getting a quarterback in like the 3rd round or the 4th round, maybe like depending on what those guys do in the combine, how they test and everything. But you look at a guy like Will Howard, who is from Pennsylvania, kind of had that unbelievable run in the college football playoff. If he ends up, slipping a little bit, second day, that might be something the Steelers end up doing, because obviously Russell Wilson isn't the long-term guy. Like, they need to figure something out there. They really haven't had any certainty at the quarterback position since Big Ben retired. And, that's kind of the one thing you can point to that maybe the reason the Steelers are more often than not one and done in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there. Like you said, Stafford's still the domino that kind of is going to dictate everything that happens.
But I will say, I still think Pittsburgh could re-sign one of its quarterbacks before the Matthew Stafford situation is resolved. I think that could happen.
Sure, and that would make sense. All right, let's move on to topic number 3, Combine Week here in Indy. We talked about it at the top of the show. Let's go right to the number 1 pick. Let's go to the Titans. What do you think happens there? The more that we've kind of read stuff, it seems like it's not going to be a quarterback, because maybe they're uncertain that those guys are, true number 1 overall picks. What do you think the Titans are going to end up doing with number 1 overall?
Ty, when they initially talked, they said they're looking for generational talent, which we don't know that sounded like a quarterback. And they said that they're open to trading back. But here's the situation in Tennessee. They have a new general manager. The front office is coming together right now. They've made some changes there. And I think that it's going to take them a little bit of time to truly dive into and assess the draft class and the top prospects to figure out what they want to do. So to me, any team that's going to talk to the Titans about trading for one, they're going to want to wait, because the Titans, in my mind, are going to want to try to get through pro days with the top quarterbacks before they make a decision about whether or not to use or trade the number 1 overall pick. Remember, a couple of years ago, it was in the first week of free agency, I believe, when the Carolina Panthers traded a haul to the Chicago Bears for the rights to the number 1 overall pick. That trade came early when the New York Jets traded up from in the top 10 to number 3 to put themselves in position to draft a quarterback that turned out to be Sam Darnold. That trade was made very early on. It might have been in February or March. In this particular case with the Tennessee Titans, though they're going to be open to listening, I don't believe they're in any rush to make a deal. And I don't believe that we will see any sort of trade until at the earliest after the pro days for Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, when they can assess these quarterbacks, figure out what they really do and don't have with the number 1 pick, spend all the requisite time that they need with these particular prospects to make a full and complete determination about what is the best path and best course of action to take with the number 1 overall pick. While they might be open to listening and to moving the number 1 pick, they're not in any rush to move the number 1 pick. And so the process gets slowed down there. Tennessee truly doesn't know what it's going to do with the number 1 pick as we record this today in late February. And again, that's part of this week, the combine. That's part of the interview process, the pro days, and the entire evaluation process leading up to the draft in late April in Green Bay.
And it's interesting. We talked about this, a couple weeks ago, and we've talked about it a couple times. Unless someone truly falls in love with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, it's hard to imagine that the Titans would get the type of haul they'd maybe looking for in different years for trading the number 1 pick. I just can't see a team, trading 3 first-round picks to move up to number 1. Now, maybe it happens, but if that's the case and you're not really getting back what you want, then maybe they do just stand pat and get a guy like Abdul Carter, who everyone has kind of said, like, hey, if there is a generational player in the class, it might be this guy.
Here's the other thing to keep in mind. The quarterback draft class supposedly in 2026 is said to be better than the one this year. Now, again, a lot changes during the year. Quarterbacks could regress. Maybe that doesn't turn out to be right, and the quarterbacks this year all of a sudden rise up. So you don't know. But if you're the Titans and you have holes everywhere, why not fill one of those other holes? Why not acquire extra draft capital and figure, you know what? We'll come back and address the quarterback at a later date, especially when they're aiming and building everything towards a new stadium in Nashville, and they're not opening the stadium next year. So with an eye on the future, you don't have to rush to fill that quarterback spot. But if there's a guy you love at 1 that you fall in love with at their pro days, that you fall in love with during this evaluation, then you don't ever bypass the chance to take a blue chip quarterback if that's how you have him evaluated. But that's up to the Titans to figure out how they're going to evaluate these guys, and that's why they're not going to be in any rush to get a trade done anytime soon.
So we'll keep an eye on that. That'll be very interesting to see how that whole situation shakes out. Let's stick with the draft and move to topic number 4, Shefty. When you talk about this draft, what is the one thing that you think you're the most certain about when it comes to this draft?
Well, we talked about the Titans waiting at number 1. I feel like they are going to be very patient if and when they wind up dealing the number 1 pick. But the thing that I feel most comfortable and confident in this upcoming draft is that the Cleveland Browns at number 2 will wind up taking a quarterback because they have to, because logic dictates that, because common sense dictates that, because they have Deshaun Watson, who you don't even know is going to be able to play again in the upcoming season, hurt, having undergone another surgery on his torn Achilles. You have all the money invested in him. So you need financial relief and you need a quarterback. And the only way to do that is to be able to do it at number 2. And so if the Titans decide that they're not going to go quarterback and they're going to go with a generational player like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, that leaves the Cleveland Browns with the option of whichever quarterback they deem to be the best quarterback in this upcoming draft. So to me, when we go over all these questions about the upcoming draft, the one thing that I feel completely comfortable and confident in predicting is that the Cleveland Browns will go quarterback at number 2, in part because they need to, in part because they have to, and in part because it makes all the sense in the world that they're going to. The Cleveland Browns, quarterback at number 2. Put it down for me, Ty.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And for Browns fans' sake, I hope they finally hit on a guy. I hope they finally find a guy who's going to be there longer than, 2 years, 3 years into his first contract. And then it's like, oh, well, let's cut this guy loose. He's not. I mean, we thought they had it with Baker. Whatever happened there, happened there. But this is always what I thought about with the Myles Garrett situation, too, is not only do they have the number 2 pick, we've talked about this on Pat's show and on here that there's definitely no certainty that they're going to trade Myles Garrett. But if they were going to, the haul I would imagine you would get back from a guy like that, like could they get, another first round pick in this year's draft, a first round pick in next year's draft? Isn't he the kind of piece that, would dictate getting that type of haul that you would expect for like a top 5 pick?
Oh, unquestionably. And again, Andrew Berry, the Browns general manager, has been on record saying that he wouldn't trade Myles Garrett for 2 ones. Now, if he were actually offered 2 ones, I think that's a hard offer to turn down. As great as Myles Garrett is, he's going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame one day. But 2 ones, woo, that's an awful lot for an older defensive end, no matter how dominant and great he is. Now, again, they said they're not doing that, but you go quarterback at 2, you could start the whole rebuild here if that's the route you wanted to go. Myles Garrett obviously holds a key piece in this distinction here. I still think the Cleveland Browns will make efforts to re-sign him, try to get him back to Cleveland, try to make him happier than he's been. I know it wasn't a money issue with Myles Garrett, but it doesn't mean that the Cleveland Browns can't go to him. Look, think of all the players that we've heard in recent years that wanted to be traded, that had deals worked out with teams. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Lamar Jackson, all at one point or another said, I want to be traded, don't want to play there anymore. And all of them got deals done with those respective teams. Now, Myles Garrett says this is about winning, it's about Super Bowls, but sometimes if all of a sudden you're drafting a quarterback at 2, Myles Garrett likes that quarterback at number 2, and you're offering to make him the highest paid defensive player in history, all of a sudden your stance can be swayed. So we'll see how that works out. But again, to go back to the initial point, the Cleveland Browns have to take a quarterback at 2, and that's what I would expect to happen in April.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll jot that one down. I think you're right. I think it'd be crazy for them not to, but it's the Browns. They've done crazy things in the past. Let's move on to topic number 5. Let's go from the draft to free agency. If there was one trend or something that you're really keeping your eye on in this year's free agency class, what would it be?
This is pretty simple. If we look at the success that the Philadelphia Eagles had in the Super Bowl, what would you say was one of the key factors to them winning that game, Ty?
Their offensive and defensive line.
The pass rush and pressure that they generated on Patrick Mahomes was something that played a huge part in that game, made a huge difference. And now we've got Josh Sweat become a free agent. We've got Milton Williams become a free agent. You've got some other pass rushers out there like Khalil Mack. And I think because of the way that the Eagles pass rushers have performed, because of the way we've seen the value of pass rushers in previous Super Bowls, think of Tom Brady, the 2 times he lost to the New York Giants, teams are going to place a premium on pass rushers. Milton Williams is not going to be tagged in Philadelphia. Josh Sweat is not going to be tagged in Philadelphia. Khalil Mack is not going to be tagged in Los Angeles. These guys are going to be true unrestricted free agents. And at a time where the salary cap, we heard last week, went up more than people were expecting and teams have a little bit more money, I believe the pass rushers in the upcoming free agent class are poised to really cash in and benefit, the top ones, because it's not anything new, it's not anything secret, but teams know that the key to slowing down great quarterbacks like Mahomes, as we saw in the Super Bowl, is with a pass rush. There are only so many great pass rushers out there. And so the great pass rushers in this year's free agent class are going to be paid prices that I believe are higher than people are expecting. They're going to cash in. Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, even from the tackle position, Khalil Mack, they're going to cash in during the upcoming free agent signing period.
That makes sense. I mean, you can't have enough of them either. We see these teams like the Eagles, that the ability to rotate guys and have guys be at full speed or full strength, when they're coming in and not having to play 60, 65 snaps on defense. That makes a big deal. And it's different because it's just, people's opinions. But anytime at the end of the year, you look at, they go division by division, like, hey, what does this team need to do to kind of really make that jump next year to compete? Damn near every single team is, well, they need to add a pass rusher. They need to add an elite pass rusher, or they just need to get more pass rushing depth. So I think you're right. And it seems like now there's more maybe guys who aren't household names who will still give you 7-8 sacks and a bunch of pressures. And it's like, if you can find guys like that in free agency and get an immediate impact like that, that could be the difference between, being on the fringe and making the playoffs. So I agree completely. I think that makes the most sense, especially when it's kind of a down quarterback year.
It's coming. They're going to get paid, and get ready for some sticker shock at some of those prices.
Okay. Let's move on to topic number 6, the final topic of this week's six pack. At first, they said it was an unnamed team, but then we found out the Green Bay Packers have proposed to officially eliminate the tush push to the competition committee. Personally, as a Packers fan, I understand the optics of it. People don't love it. I'm okay with it because not even necessarily the tush push. The amount of times I saw the Packers give up first downs on 4th and 1 and 4th and 2 last year, right up the middle. Both times they played the Lions. I think the Lions were like 10 of 11 on 4th down. So I'm okay with it. But obviously you got teams like the Eagles and the Bills who use it all the time. It's a massive advantage. And we've also seen other teams try to do the tush push, and it's not like it's just a guaranteed first down. These teams that are good at it, they know how to do it. There's certainly scheme and strategy involved. What do you think ultimately happens with this whole situation?
Well, to me, it's a little odd, right? It's a football play. The sport is football. Now, I don't know the particulars of whether players are more at risk for injury, and I think player health and safety always is paramount and should be treated seriously. But again, should we stop other running plays as well? Should other running plays not be allowed because they're dangerous? Like, football is inherently a dangerous sport. And you've got a situation where basically you got one team that has mastered this play. Any team can run the Packers can run the play. Everybody can run the play. Mm-hmm. The issue is very few teams have offensive lines as good and as tough and as strong as Philadelphia's. Very few teams have a quarterback who can squat 600 pounds like Jalen Hurts and push the line of scrimmage. Very few teams have running backs like Saquon Barkley. Again, everybody can run that play. It's almost to me like saying, well, when Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill are together, that long ball, that's we're putting the hamstrings of defensive backs at risk with all the running they're going to do. Like, that's the sport. Onside kicks, certain kickers are better than others. Are we going to ban the onside kick? I know they modified it, but this is the sport. This is the rule. This is the game. I cannot imagine that the push-tush is going to generate 24 votes against it to have that play outlawed and banned. It seems like sour grapes to me, with all due respect to your team or anybody else that's espousing to ban that play. It's a football play. Should we get rid of the fullback up the middle play as well? Like, should the Ravens not be allowed to run the fullback because they've got Patrick Ricard, who's really strong and tough? I mean, what are we talking about here? It just seems a little bit absurd to me, but maybe there's some injury data that I don't have that I'm missing.
Yeah, and I think that's the easy way out, is just saying, hey, it's about player safety. But I thought it was very interesting when the Packers proposed to eliminate it, because at the end of the year, they didn't do it with Jordan Love, but they started bringing Tucker Kraft in motion, and he'd go under center, and then they were just basically doing the tush push with their tight end. So, like, they found success doing it. So it's very interesting that they proposed to eliminate it. I think you're right. I mean, this has happened how many times? This happened last year. Did it happen the year before too? I mean, it's one of those things. It seems like, the Eagles were so good at it and people thought there was a competitive disadvantage. There's not. We've seen other teams try to do this, and they aren't as successful as the Eagles. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, hey, you either figure out how to be successful doing it on your own, or you figure out how to stop it on defense. It's just as simple as that.
By the way, so we're going to ban the tush push, but the quarterback sneak, that's okay. That's okay to leave in the game. We're going to ban that too? Quarterback sneak is not allowed also? Like Patrick Mahomes tried that and dislocated his kneecap against the Broncos a few years back, right? It didn't work. The Chiefs, I don't think, have run Patrick Mahomes very many, if any, times since then. That's the risk that you run. The Eagles are taking a risk running Jalen Hurts every time they do that. That's the risk they choose to take. It's another running play. Are there other running plays? We're going to say, no, you can't run those plays as well. Like, it just seems like where are you drawing the line on this? Where's this coming from? It seems like sour grapes to me as much as anything else.
Yeah, and I think ultimately they're just going to say, nope, this stays. I mean, it is what it is. You know, hey, if you don't like it, figure out a way to, you know, spend some more money in free agency. The cap's going up. Spend some more money in free agency on a three technique or, you know, whatever the case may be.
I think the league has better things to do with its time, but that's up to the league to decide. By the way, speaking of things to do with your time, right? Had a nice free weekend. First weekend home without having to go to Bristol or travel anywhere since Labor Day. There's a TV series that I've started. I don't know if you've watched this yet. And again, my wife and I sit around the house a lot, watch a lot of TV. I leave it up to her to pick the shows. I watch what she wants. I watch it all. Like, I love The White Lotus. Love The White Lotus. That's back. We're 2 episodes into that. But the show that we've started watching, that I can't believe how good it is. And I can't believe I haven't heard more about it. I know I've heard some people, but nobody told me how good this was. We're 6 episodes in on a 10-episode series. Have you seen Landman?
Phenomenal.
Oh my God.
Phenomenal. Just wait. If you're on episode 6, just wait. Just wait. It's great. It's great.
Last week I was in Denver, which was unbelievable in and of itself. That was the team I first started covering, and the Broncos do a town hall. The new owners, they're incredible owners, Greg and Kerry Penner. They have various department heads present information about various departments, and they have a featured speaker. So they flew me in last week to talk to the organization, being that that's where I started, and got to spend some time in Denver, which that's where I first started covering the National Football League in 1990. It was an incredible day, and they are incredibly classy with the way they run that organization, and the organization has grown and changed so much since I covered it. But I was flying back from Denver, and my wife said, hey, she had watched the first 2 episodes of Landman while I was gone. She said, catch up, download it, watch it on the plane back. So I watched the first 2. I'm like, that's pretty good. Like it held my attention. Mm-hmm. But then it just got better and better and better and better. And now we're 6 in, and I can't wait to watch the final 4. I got to be in Indianapolis now for the Combine. We'll do it maybe when I get back, but we're also heading into a busy time of the year. I have a feeling that we may just sit down one night on a non-Matthew Stafford trade night and bang out these final 4 episodes, because it's incredible.
Yeah, it's great. And also, to bring it back to football, it has maybe the best cameo of the year, Jerry Jones.
I know. What number segment is he in? Do you remember that by chance?
I want to say he's either in the 9th episode or the season finale. I can't remember which one it is, but you know, I mean, talk about blowing people away. He was unbelievable.
Well, that's the funny thing is I had seen him show up online, like in those viral videos. Oh, Jerry Jones doing Landman. I'm like, what's Land? I didn't even know what it was. Mm-hmm. I still didn't know. And then my wife's like, yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes. Watch these 2 on the way home. And hey, I'll just say this. I think the finest show that I've ever streamed, me personally, is Your Honor on Netflix. And I got to say, this is in that category, I think.
Yeah, Taylor Sheridan, the guy who created it. Jerry Jones is in episode 9, by the way, but the guy who created it, I mean, obviously Yellowstone, you know, I don't know if you've watched that, but everyone loves Yellowstone. He's kind of got this whole world that he's created from this. So and you're right. I'm kind of surprised with Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm. I mean, the cast is unbelievable. It really didn't get talked about that much, maybe because it wasn't on, you know, HBO or one of like the real power players. It was on Paramount Plus, but it is a phenomenal show.
I'll just say this for anybody that hasn't seen it, start to watch Landman. Wow. That's my recommendation this week. All right, Ty, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I want to thank our great producer, Dan Stanzik, Ben Smith, for his help as well. For you, the audience, for tuning into another Adam Schefter podcast. We're going to get busy here at the Combine, and we'll be back in this spot next week to review some of the things that we've heard, begin to preview some of the things that are ahead, and get ready for the start of the new league year and all the activity that comes along with it. On Wednesday, March 12th, though, the negotiating window opens Monday, March 10th, and that's when fireworks will continue to fly. Until then, have a great week, everybody. Be well, stay safe, and enjoy Landman.